Hey everyone, so I come to you with part 3 of my vacation haul video. These books come from two separate places. Two of these books I bought in just a little bookstore in Lake Placid, New York. I think it's called the Bookstore Plus. Yeah, it's just a really small bookstore. It's not the most inspired selection, but I like stopping there. And my grandmother had given me some money, so I didn't feel that guilty money-wise buying books. So I bought two books. And they're both books that I honestly could have bought literally anywhere else. Literally, I think both of these books are probably for sale in Target or something. But they're both books that I knew I wanted to read and just decided to finally break down and buy them. And one of them I've already started reading, and I'll start with that one. It's Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari, and this is super famous. I mean, yeah, again, it's like for sale in Target, and it's for sale in airports everywhere. It's one of those books that everyone's at least heard of if they haven't read it. I thought it sounded really interesting, and again, I knew I wanted to read it because it sort of takes a very macroscopic view of human history, starting with human evolution, how human intelligence evolved, and like going through like the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and at the end a little bit about our future, which is probably going to be pretty bleak, but anyway, yeah, and I love that sort of thing. I love like big history like that. And so this sounded right up my alley, and I have already started reading it. I'm about 40 pages into it, and I am really liking it so far. It's very easy to read. I feel like Harari conveys a lot of information very economically in it. It reads very quickly, and yeah, I do have some quibbles so far. They are only quibbles. Hopefully they don't blossom into frustrations or real big criticisms, because I want to enjoy this book, but if they do, you will all be the first to know. And then the other book I bought at that bookstore was A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, his book on, cosmology and physics and such. Physics is an area that I know very little about, aside from what I learned in, high school, so I think this will be a fun read. Okay. Moving on to 3 books, and these books I was given by my aunt. I don't know I forget if I mentioned this, but if I haven't, or if any of you weren't here when I mentioned it, which probably that is the case, since there are a lot of you who are new. So my aunt, my mother's older sister, is an anthropologist. She teaches at Yale University. She did research in Indonesia and Pakistan and other places. She speaks Javanese and Indonesian and Urdu, and I think also some Dutch, but anyway. And anyway, she's an anthropologist. She's very interesting to talk to. She reads a lot of interesting stuff. And so I had posted on Facebook a list of books that I came up with that are books that have been on are books that I want to read for a long time, but just haven't gotten around to. And I just, one evening, decided to make a list of these books that I knew I wanted to read, but I just hadn't gotten around to them. Either they're intimidating, or I just keep putting them off, or whatever. And I posted that list on Facebook, and I'm friends with her on Facebook, and she saw it, and she had a couple of those books, and so she just brought them with her to vacation and gave them to me. And she also threw in one extra one. So the first of those books is The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud, which I feel like I've talked about Freud a lot on my channel lately, but yeah, I definitely want to read more of his work after reading Dream Psychology. Actually, it occurred to me that Freud is his writing style reminds me a lot of David Hume. Very engaging. Not easy, but engaging. Not easy, but not like inscrutable or something. Not well written, but just the ideas are complex, and it can be something you have to think about as you read it, and I like that. I like that a lot. That's why I like David Hume, and I think it's why I like reading Freud. So this will be super interesting. It's, one of the most influential books of all time, whatever you think of Freud. And anyway, yeah, so I was very grateful to my aunt for giving me that. And the next one, the next two books are both by the same author. My aunt is a huge Susan Sontag fan, and one of the books that was on that list was On Photography by Susan Sontag. Yeah, my aunt was reading this book because she was very interested in cultural differences in attitudes toward photography and images. Because she did her dissertation in Indonesia, and they have a very different attitude toward taking photographs in Indonesia than we do in the United States. Like, you'll never find a photograph in Indonesia that was taken of just one person. They never do that. And they also will never take a photograph of 3 people, because it's bad luck. And she was very interested at one point in her career of, like, cultural differences in the approach to photography. And so reading this book was a part of that. And she could never really get any funding for research on that, so it never really went anywhere. But anyway, she had this book and she gave it to me, and I'm really glad, because I love Susan Sontag. I think she's one of my new favorite authors this year. And on that same note, my aunt also gave me a Susan Sontag reader. And this just has a ton of her essays, excerpts from her fiction, and yeah, it's just a big sort of eclectic selection of her works. So that's awesome. I can just read a ton of Susan Sontag. But anyway, that is that part of the haul. I will have one more part to this haul, but it may come in a few days, because the books in that haul are being shipped to me from a bookstore in Albany, New York, and they haven't arrived yet. So when they arrive, I will do that part of the haul, and I'm really excited to talk about those books. So this was a great bookstore. I'm also going to talk about the bookstore in that video, because it was just a great bookstore that my mom and I found, but I'll leave talking about it to that video. Anyway, so once again, same with the other 2 hauls. If you have read any of these, give me your thoughts. And anyway, I hope you're all having a nice evening, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.